Andrea, would you please try to come up, make your way to the podium, and accept the medallion? The medallion you will receive will honor those qualities that distinguish Julius Rosenwald as a philanthropist and communal leader, and that in the opinion of all of us gathered here today, and in the unanimous opinion of all past Rosenwald Award recipients, distinguish you. The inscription reads, presented to Andrea R. Yablon for distinguished achievement in leadership in advancing the cause of human welfare through the Jewish Federation. And Andrea, your name is also being inscribed on the wall in the Federation building lobby that commemorates those who have received this great honor. In the future, all visitors to the central address of the Jewish community, our Federation building, will see your name among the extraordinary leaders of our community who throughout the years have made us all proud. Kol HaKavod and Mazel Tov. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrea Yablon.
Thank you, Michael. There's not much I can say after that, but I do have a speech. Thank you. And thank you for everyone who said something. Michael, thank you for what you said, for your support, and for your leadership of our community. And I'm not going to call everybody my friend, but I do have many friends in the audience, many friends who've spoken today. So if I don't call them friends, please understand. Thank you to all the prior Julius Memorial Award honorees, many of whom are here today. Thank you for all you have taught me about community, leadership, and philanthropy, and forget what I said, thank you for your friendship. Thank you, Steve, for your years of leadership and mentoring. I am so honored to share the podium with you today, given the importance of this day in your role as it's your last annual meeting. Thank you, Rabbi Siegel. Rabbi Siegel has been my rabbi since he arrived at Anshe Emet, and you heard it's a synagogue that I am proud to have been a member of for many years and to have served as a board member and officer. Thank you to our JUF Federation staff members. Our Federation's lay professional partnership is outstanding, but it's unique. And many of us serve on boards. We have wonderful relationships between professionals and lay people, but this is really a partnership. So thank you for your devotion to our common cause and your constant inspiration that you give to me as well as to other lay leaders. Mazal Tov to our inspiring young leaders, to Marissa and Alex, to Elizabeth and Irene. You serve as powerful role models to the next generation, and it is really important. I didn't expect so many of you to speak so much about Marshall today, and I'm going to go ahead and say what I said, but I thank you for that acknowledgement, because he is the person whose support and shared values make it possible for me to be here today. And I am confident that if it were not for our relationship, I would not be in this, have had the leadership roles I've had at Federation and be here today. He encouraged me to be who I am, and he continues to inspire me every day through his devotion to our people and our agencies, his Zionist ideals, his appreciation of our Jewish heritage and traditions, and his love of our family. To my family and friends who are here today, Thank you for sharing Marshall's and my values and for inspiring both of us as we devoted our time and energies to meeting the needs of our community and addressing the issues of our time. You can see the results of these efforts in our children, and you've already been introduced to Alexis and David, and to our grandchildren, Leah and Lincoln, who've been cheering through many of the speeches and the references that were made throughout this afternoon. L'adore vador, from generation to generation, they are mentioned. They are decent human beings. They share our values, and they are committed to leading Jewish lives. That's Marshall and my bequest to future generations. But this is about me. I am so deeply honored. I don't mean to minimize that, but I just want you to hear, excuse me, Linda, I'm ad-libbing. I'm deeply honored and humbled to receive this award. You've heard about Julius Rosenwald. You've heard the significance of this award. You see before you the list of previous honorees. Accepting this award gives me the responsibility to continue the work of Julius Rosenwald, a singular leader of both our Jewish and civic communities, whose efforts to improve society had such a lasting impact. But now let me tell you why I've devoted my time and my energy to activities that are aimed at creating a brighter, stronger Jewish future and to improving the world for all, Tikkun Olam. Let me tell you about my Yerusha, my inheritance from past generations, and the 4 factors that have inspired me and continue to motivate my service to our people. The first is my background, home, and upbringing. In many ways, I'm a woman of a transitional generation. I grew up expecting to have full secular and Jewish educational opportunities. And yet, I've learned that was not a universally shared goal or achievement among women of my generation, even though it was easier for us than for women of prior generations. I never thought it unusual that I expected to have a professional career or to be successful in volunteer activities. And yet I now understand that not everyone of my generation shared those views or had those goals. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy. My parents, Vivian and Bob Rice, Zichronom Livracha, were the children of immigrants, and they were teenagers and young adults during the Great Depression. These factors influenced them and accordingly influenced me. I was born at Michael Reese Hospital, grew up in East Rogers Park, then a Jewish neighborhood, and I attended public school. Ours was a very Jewish home in terms of interests as well as observance. My family was active at our neighborhood conservative synagogue, B'nai Zion, and Jewish activities. Both my sister and I participated in programs at the Rogers Park JCC, which hasn't been there for a long time. My mother's parents were both born in the old city of Jerusalem in the late 19th century, when it was part of the Ottoman Empire. They met in Chicago when my grandmother was in high school, and my grandfather was a boarder in her parents' home. Both had ties to their family that remained in pre-state Israel. Those family ties were an important part of my childhood, influenced the strong pro-Israel feelings in our home, and motivated me to visit Israel as soon as I was able to do so. My grandfather died before my first birthday, and my grandmother and young Uncle Arthur, who's with us today, were an important part of our immediate family, living with us for a number of years. My father's parents came from Lithuania in Ukraine. They met in Milwaukee, where they both lived when they came to the US, and they moved to Chicago shortly after my father was born. My father's family was active in Jewish communal life, a trait that my father inherited. My great-grandfather founded a Hebrew school in Milwaukee, and my grandmother, his daughter, was a founder of an auxiliary of the Daughters of Zion Day Nursery and Orphanage. That agency became the Parkview Home, which is one of the Jewish homes for the aged that merged in 1972 to create the Council for Jewish Elderly, CJE Senior Life. My parents, uncles, and aunts remained connected to the auxiliary for many years, and serendipitously, my family connection continued when Marshall became CJE's chairman of the board. My childhood exposed me to Jewish organizational life and enabled me to experience some of the most significant moments of 20th century Jewish life. Some memories. I remember listening to the UN vote to partition British Mandate Palestine on November 29, 1947. Our family sat spellbound, listening to the radio as we heard the UN members approve the creation of the State of Israel. I remember attending Zionist rallies at the Chicago Stadium with my family. And because life in Israel was difficult, and there were food shortages and rationing until the late 1950s, we sent care packages to our immediate family, even as my parents contributed to our Chicago campaign to help our worldwide Jewish family. The second influence was my Jewish education, both formal and informal. You've heard it a lot today, but in Hebrew school I learned that Kol Yisrael Arevim Zel Lazeh. Every Jew is responsible for one another. That principle continues to motivate me. I attended Hebrew school when not many girls in my neighborhood did, and I was bat mitzvah. My formal Jewish education continued through my undergraduate years. Jewish summer camp was my most important educational influence. The 6 years that I attended Camp Ramah and my participation in an affiliated youth group during high school were integral to my Jewish education and social life and made me the committed Jew that I am today. I have also seen the impact of Jewish camping on my own family, as my daughter and grandchildren have had the same experiences at Asrui, and our family is deeply committed to our JUF Camp initiative. I continue to believe that Jewish camping and teen programs, and now Jewish preschool and Israel experiences, such as Tam Yisrael and others, are among the most important educational opportunities that we can give to our children and future generations. The third factor that influenced me was my first trip to Europe and Israel, a year after I graduated from college. My friends and I attended Kabbalat Shabbat services at the Great Synagogue of Rome. We had been told we had to see the magnificent synagogue and that it was the place to be on Friday night when young Roman Jews gathered after services. I had a conversation that night with a young woman, approximately my age, who asked whether I had ever heard of the Joint Distribution Committee, the Joint, or JDC, or ORT. She told me she had been born and raised in Egypt, but that when the Jewish community was expelled in the middle 1950s, her family was saved by the Joint, who brought them to Rome. She also told me that ORT had educated her and trained her as a hairdresser, and she expressed such appreciation for these agencies that I knew I had to learn more about them and help support their work. I don't remember whether I knew then that JDC and ORT are two of our Federation's 3 historic overseas partners, funded by what is now our JUF campaign. From Italy, I flew to Israel for my first visit there. I was met at the airport, excuse me. I was met at the airport by my grandfather's youngest brother, my great uncle, a man who was born in Palestine under Ottoman rule, who lived under British rule, thank you, and then became a citizen of the State of Israel. I still remember that as we rode from the airport to his home, I was overwhelmed by the smell of citrus from the orange groves along the way. I believe that the smell of citrus remains one of the things I like most about Scottsdale, simply because it reminds me of my first trip to Israel. While in Israel, I learned about Federation's third historic overseas partner, the Jewish Agency for Israel, JAFE. I learned how JAFE had been created prior to the declaration of the State of Israel, and how, because of that agency's efforts, the government was able to function the moment the British left in May 1948, at which point Israel's war for independence began. My mother's cousins, both women and men, told me how they fought in that war as teenagers and young adults, and also told me about the cousin who had been killed during those years. I also learned about the incredible effort that had been made to rescue and resettle first Holocaust survivors, and then more than 700,000 Jews who had been expelled from Arab countries, beginning on November 30th, 1947, the day after the UN partition vote. I also visited Yad Vashem on that trip. When I was born in Chicago at the beginning of World War II, the Holocaust was already underway in Europe. And Jews living in my paternal grandparents' hometowns had already been murdered, all the children. I knew from then on that my mere existence gave me the obligation of helping to ensure Jewish survival and continuity. I returned to the US from that first trip, committed to helping Israel and Jews wherever they may live. I was determined to make a difference and to become involved in Jewish life. I started in the Young Leadership Division of the Federation, which was then known as the Young People's Division. And now I come to the fourth factor that has influenced my life. You won't be surprised. I was so fortunate to meet Marshall, a man whose passion for these causes and our Jewish community strengthened mine through the years. I was so fortunate to have been able to travel with him to Jewish communities where our contributions have made a difference in people's lives, and during which we were able to create lifelong friendships with other like-minded people, many of whom are here today. I was so fortunate to have the privilege of creating a Jewish home with him, one in which I believe our values have been passed to future generations. I am so fortunate to have raised a daughter, Alexis, and gained a son-in-law, David, who have given birth to two wonderful grandchildren, Leah and Lincoln, who share these values and seek to maintain them. Throughout my adult life, I have always been aware of my good fortune in being born and raised in the US at this time in history. My commitment to tzedakah as well as to Jewish communal activity gives meaning to my life and is my responsibility as part of the Jewish people. I am reminded of this responsibility every time I visit one of our local agencies, speak with professional staffs or families served by our programs, or travel to Israel or another country where I can see the impact of our work. I thank you for this incredible honor, and I look forward to honoring Julius Rosenwald's legacy to our Federation and our Jewish Chicago community by continuing my efforts. I wish you all a good and a sweet year and a year of peace. L'shana tova u'mtuka, chatima tova.